I loved to talk. I had lots of friends. But in 7th grade, there was a pretty quick switch where I became really self-conscious and felt pretty uncomfortable in my own skin. And I really lost all of my friends at school. And at the time, I wasn't super close to my family. And so it was really a 7th grader's worst nightmare. And it was the loneliest period of my life. And being somebody who talks a lot still, I had been silently observing at school because I didn't have people to talk to. So I had a lot to say, no one to say it to, so I began writing in a journal. Let's see. Those are all my journals. Not all of them, actually. They wouldn't all fit in a picture. It became such an outlet for me. In a journal, I was free from judgment, and I was free from the eyes of anyone, the pressure to be interesting or cool. I became my best version of myself in those journals. And it was during that time, probably like midway through 7th grade, that I decided I'd also spend some time picking up this devotional that I'd been collecting dust that someone had given to me a long time before that. And I began adding a devotional reading to my nighttime routine. And I was still so naive. I didn't have descriptors or the language I have now for what I believed about God or who God was. But in 7th grade, I still knew God in a way that I never had before because I spent time with God each night. And back then, my church had kind of told me what to believe, and I had no reason to question it. Since then, I've had a lot of frustrations with the way that they've chosen to go about ministry. There are so many things we disagree on, but God still really used them to nurture me. And I know that because I had this revelation a while ago because I found an excerpt in one of my 7th or 8th grade journals where I had been talking about how I felt like people didn't care about me at school and I was invisible. And then I literally wrote the words, "Wait, I remember, there are people who love me. The adults at church like me, and they talk to me and want to know about my life." And that's really stuck with me, especially as I do ministry and try to make it intergenerational, that even though, despite all of the things that I may disagree with my church, they made a difference in my life. And in 7th grade, I knew I was loved because of them. One of those disagreements I have with my church, since leaving high school, was about women in ministry. Growing up, I still remember feeling really frustrated by the notion that women were to be submissive, but I still yielded to it. It was all I knew. And I still yielded to it even when I felt a call to ministry. For me, a call to ministry was this clear moment of direction without a clear destination. I was at camp. This is me at camp, and I was about 16, and after about 10 or so years of proudly and confidently declaring that I was going to be a teacher, when I grew up, I'd be a teacher, I suddenly that summer did not know what I wanted to do with my life. It was very sudden. And at this 1 week of camp, midway through the week, there was a sermon, and I had not paid attention to it at all. The preacher, at the end of the sermon that I hadn't been paying attention to, said, "Those who feel called to commit their lives to ministry." I don't remember if he said for them to come up or to just think about it, but I felt this really sudden, overwhelming sense that that was me, and I began to cry, and it felt so random. I had been feeling nothing and not paying attention to the sermon before that. And I remember I cried all through small group. No one asked if I was okay. I think they thought that I was just really moved by that sermon I didn't pay attention to. I sat by myself while everyone else had a snack up the hill, but I sat by myself by a tree and I prayed. And in those moments, I felt really clearly that God was speaking to me. And the times I felt like God has spoken to me, I feel like I've heard 3 paragraphs in an instant. And in that instant, I felt like my whole life was going to be committed to speaking to people about who God was. At the time, I reasoned this through the lens of my church's beliefs. And so I felt this pull toward ministry, and my understanding of it was that I was to do the only thing that I thought women were allowed to do in the church, which was overseas mission work, which is why it was so scary. I was sitting there thinking, oh my gosh, I have to leave my entire family and go overseas. When I came home, they wanted to announce my new call to ministry and my decision at my church and pray for me. They told me what I was going to do. I stood in the back with my pastor. My mom had left and went and sat up in the church. I remember him putting his hand on my shoulder and whispering to me, "Now, you know we don't allow women to be pastors." And I proudly declared that that is why I'm going to be a missionary. And he affirmed that that was good. And I was so affirmed, and I felt glad. And now 15 years later, I'll attend seminary in the fall of 2025 to pursue ordination. A few weeks after this call to ministry, I was a camp counselor, and I felt my call be refined. I was so energized and excited, and I used that energy to channeled that energy through prayer. I prayed so hard that God would open my eyes, that I could see all of these kids the way that God saw them, that I would love them so clearly that they would know it. And the more I prayed, the more articulate I became about what I needed, and those prayers worked so well. I loved every kid, the awkward ones, the ones that were more comfortable in their skin, all the same. And I felt so passionate about telling them who God was, getting them as excited as I was about who God was. And I wanted to tell them it in a way that they understood, and I felt capable of that. One of the things I always tell students is that there's a type of prayer for me that I've always felt like God has answered, and in a positive way, answered with a yes, was that whenever I prayed that I would have help loving a person, God has always come through. And that summer, I learned that lesson. And also with that, I learned that call to ministry that didn't have a direction was a call to be working with kids in a ministry setting. And although my hometown church had no staff, and no churches around my hometown had staff, I still entered college as a youth ministry major. My college changed my life. I almost went to an entirely different college, actually. I had one that I'd set my sights on for years. They had a camp team that came to my camp that I always thought was really cool, and I was sure I'd go to this college for like 4 or 5 years. And I even made this funny Facebook status now about finally finished applying to Milligan College, and I've looked at every other college, and nothing even compares. So hopefully I'll hear back from them soon so that everyone can stop ragging on me to apply to another college. I did not go to Milligan College. I ended up going to Gordon College right before it was time to finish applying to colleges. I thought to myself, hey, wouldn't it be cool if there was an art college? I wanted to also major in art. There was an art college, and it was a Christian college, and it was in Boston, the city that I really love. And I Googled it, and it turns out Gordon has the best Christian art program, and they popped right up, and I fell in love and quickly shifted my focus to them. And Gordon changed my life. Gordon was pretty ecumenical. They were pretty ecumenical, and for who I was at age 18, it was perfect. I was loved so much by my peers, by my professors, that I feel like a lot of past pains healed. I was loved so much that I was open to new ideas for the first time, because those I loved held different ideas than mine. And also, it took until sophomore year for me to realize that there were churches with youth ministry employees. I don't know what I thought I was doing, but my sophomore year, I realized this could be a career for me. I can make a living by doing what I love. And I really thought that before that I was going to college for something I'd do voluntarily. Soon, during college, I worked at in a few different ministry positions. I worked with the camp that I grew up going to for one summer. I worked at a Salvation Army camp with underprivileged kids that had a lot of times broken homes. The very next summer, I worked in, this is a tidbit from my college. That's what my college room looked like. I can't talk about college without telling people about my funny room. One more thing. I'm going back. I'm sorry. Before graduating, I learned that I had been missing a world's credit, some kind of like credit where you need to know more about like the world. And I don't know how I missed it, but it was actually like a person's worst nightmare. Like probably 2 months before graduation, they said, hey, you can't graduate unless you have this course. And it was scary. I was like, I'm gonna have to pay for another semester. But it turns out you could also do a study abroad. I had previously spent all of my savings on a trip to the Philippines because I had never been there. My dad grew up there. Spent all of my savings on a trip to the Philippines. I had done it for exactly 3 weeks, as long as you could go without a visa. And it was possible to apply for a trip that was at least 3 weeks, that was the minimum, to count as your world credit. And so I was able to make, by the grace of God, that trip to the Philippines my credit as long as I wrote some papers on it. Turns out that made the trip so much more fulfilling for me. I understood my dad's culture so much better. It was really a godsend that aligned so perfectly. But anyway, during college, I worked at a Salvation Army camp with underprivileged kids, and the next summer I worked in Walnut Creek, California with very privileged kids. I loved both jobs. I loved all the people I met. That contrast of those two environments taught me a lot. The next year, for an internship during the school year, I worked at a mega church, and it was the opposite of the church I grew up in that had 50 people. This church had 4 campuses. I loved the church. I loved the students. That's a picture of me with my 9th grade small group when I was graduating. I, at college, was influenced by my Catholic friends, my Episcopal friends, my Baptist friends. So theologically, I may be pretty different from where Gordon is as an institution, but Gordon was exactly what I needed and when I needed it. After leaving Gordon, I entered into my second most loneliest year of my life, having moved to Florida for a job that did not have the amount of support that I needed for a 22-year-old kind of leaving and not having anybody, not knowing anyone. There's a lot to say about that year, but what I want to say in this platform is that there I met my friend and mentor, Joy Lockridge, who just got married, so her last name is probably different. But she was an associate pastor at the time, and she saw me, she knew what I needed, and through her, I found a church with a thriving ministry and all the support that I needed coming out of college. And that's actually a picture of me with her kids. I was her friend and babysitter, I used to joke. But she helped me find a position, and it was the perfect position for me at the time. I had so much support. My boss and I got along great. It had a 2-year cap on how long you could work there in that position. And so I was in a great position to find Trinity after. I applied lots of places. I didn't have any ties to any particular place. So I was just set on, I'm going to go where there is a church that feels that I fit, where I feel called to, and I'm not going to let location deter me or guide me in that. I want to go to a community where I fit. And that community ended up being Trinity. Oh, that was Tampa. I forgot that slide. I just want to say a tidbit about Phil the phone guy, the outfit I'm wearing. That was my idea, and I'm really proud of it. It was just that the kids would put their phone in the before youth group, and then we draw a number, and if their number was drawn, then they'd get a little piece of candy. So it was very exciting. So this is me. This is my Trinity time. There's some little snippets of it. My time at Trinity has been really great. It's also been really unique. My first day was Pastor Pam's last day. Also, 8 months into my position, there was a worldwide pandemic. So I ended up having to learn how to do ministry from my apartment, which was hard. But the beauty in all of this is that I kind of watched Trinity transform over the past 5 years. I've watched students grow and ask good questions about their faith, and I've watched people love one another and hold tight to the community. And before I end, though, I want to bring this full circle to my mom again. So my mom and I, now our relationship's very different, but still really good. She loves and respects me, but we also understand God so differently, and the world so differently. But I've noticed that my mom's love for people around her and my love for the people around me both lead us toward God's work. In each place that I've landed, God has worked differently. People have believed different things. People have done things differently. And while it's still important to work through those differences at times, I am so confident that God's love fills us, empowers us enough to make change. It's powerful enough to spread regardless of its context. And she may have never said those words to me, but because of our lives, our contrasting lives, still making impacts, she's taught me that through the way she lives her life. So that is all I have to say. Thanks for listening.
Thanks, Jean. Are there any questions or comments for Jean before we adjourn?
I'm curious, what made your personality change in school?
Personality, like my beliefs, my confidence.
Your confidence, from being outgoing and having lots of friends to becoming a rather...
Oh, you mean like in 7th grade when that happened? You know, I am always curious about what happened. It really felt like one day I kind of woke up and I was like overthinking what I was saying, and it kind of like lasted, you know? It was so weird to me. Sometimes I don't want to ever say that, like, I definitely don't believe like God inflicted that kind of emotional trauma on me, but at the same time, it like almost felt like it happened so that I could meet God at the same time. But I also, at the same time, don't want to believe that. So, but yeah, I just woke up one day and I was just so uncomfortable in my own skin. And so my friends were like, man, this girl's awkward, so we don't want to hang out with her anymore, which I can't blame them. I was kind of awkward, so. But yeah.
Jean, I'm going to follow up on Julie. What did that experience with you and all the reflections that you put in your journal have to say to you about your work with young people now?
Can you say that again? How does it?
Okay. What did your experience in 7th grade that you just talked about and all the reflections you did in your journal have to say to you about how you work with young people yourself today?
Well, one, whenever I have them do devotions, I always make them journal because I think it's so helpful. But also I just, I don't know, it's made me, I watched myself go from being so conscious, even when I was writing in my journal, of trying to be cool, like I was living my life to try to make sure others liked me, to realizing no one's watching me, and I stopped caring, and I started feeling comfortable in who I was because I felt loved. And I really see in youth that, like, very clearly almost to me, that like when a student feels really loved and accepted, they are the opposite of my 7th grade self, and they are so comfortable in the skin, they're funny, they shine. But I can also tell the difference when there's somebody who is conscious because they didn't feel super loved, and they're maybe afraid to kind of, they're trying like really hard maybe to fit in or to look cool, and it kind of backfires. And I see it really clearly, I think, because it happened to me. And so I'm just very aware that the way that I came out of my shell and felt more comfortable in my skin was because I loved myself, and then in college I felt loved by all my community and how it transformed me. So I always tell kids that if you like somebody who feels really loved, you're gonna know it, and they're gonna become their best version of themselves if you love them. So.
Jean, I wanted to ask you about working with privileged kids and working with kids without privilege. What's the same from for what you do, and what's different? How do you bridge those? How do you work with those two groups, which can seem challenging?
Yeah. There's a lot that was different. There was the students who were more privileged. I felt that they, again, they were more comfortable in their skin. They were charismatic because of it. They also had so many opportunities to like see the world, to really great education. But mainly, I think it was the fact that they had a really good support system around them a lot of the time. Not always, but like a lot of the time. And so it kind of like, you could tell in their comfortability with themselves that they were like that. And then with the underprivileged kids, granted, I worked with like high school and middle school, and then I worked with 9-year-olds at the camp. But they were very, very much like, I don't know, uncomfortable with themselves, I guess. They were very much felt like they were putting on a show. It's more clear with like a 9-year-old, I think, but it felt like they were trying very hard to get attention that maybe they didn't have before, which led to a lot of like struggles with trying to keep a group dynamic and trying to, create order. And then I think the similarity was, I don't know, it was so different. The similarity was probably, they all needed love. It all comes back to that. They all needed some sort of community of feeling like accepted. And I think that stays the same through everything, like the way that you need to make sure you're listening really well and making eye contact and doing all those things that make a person feel loved. I think the thing that I tell students sometimes, because there will be times when somebody may not be acting in a way that shows that they love someone. And a student might protest and say, hey, I am listening to them, I am doing them. And I always tell them like, no, what we need is for them to know that they are loved. So do what it takes for them to know that you're listening. Do what it takes for them to know that they are loved, and you can ask them, but how to do that. But I think that's what's similar, that they just all need that community. That's really simple of an answer, I guess, but yeah.
How did you meet your future husband?
I met him on a dating app, a modern romance. In 2020, he and I went on a not super COVID responsible date, probably, but it worked out. Neither of us got COVID either, so. And our first date was 9 hours long. It was very fun. We just got lunch, and then we were like, let's keep hanging out. So it was really great. Yeah. Anybody else? What time is it?
9:30, we still got time if anyone has a question.
Got lots of time.
How have young people changed, if they have changed over the years, in their concerns and what you're seeing and observing from them?
It's hard to say, because I feel like I slowly moved from one type of context to another, the other being a very affluent area. And I think those factor into that. But I definitely see, in a weird way, like a lot of times we see worse things happening in the world. I kind of see it getting better in a way. I was just looking through, I was trying to find that excerpt from the journal last night, and I was reading through some of my journals, and I was like, man, my students seem a lot healthier emotionally than I was when I was in 7th grade. And I also like see that true at the past few churches I've worked at. And I wonder if, like, you know, the world really is just on an individual level almost, like mental health wise. And I wonder if the world's getting a little better almost. But yeah, I think that the issues have shifted. There are some things that we've really figured out and worked past. There's definitely so many things that, like, maybe in the 90s that youth ministries did that we're learning were not so great, and we're fixing them. So I guess the answer is that things I think are getting better. So, yeah.
Tom.
Hey, Jean, thank you. What are some of your hopes and goals for seminary?
So, ever since college, I've wanted to go to seminary. Sorry, I'm gonna cry. It's been like an emotional journey to get there. My college experience was so good, and I learned so much, it changed, and I've always wanted to continue that journey. But it seemed impossible until about last year. And there's just been like a bunch of doors that opened up. My parents were a big part of that. They helped me get to like a financial place where it was possible. There were people encouraging me along the way. But my hope for seminary going in is just I want to learn. Like I want to broaden my horizons, understand things a little deeper. I'm horrible at things like history, and I really need some help there, getting to that like background. And there's just things that I want to learn. And so I don't know where it will lead me, but I'm just excited to learn at the moment, so.
Well, on a happy note, as an artist, you said, I'm an artist, you went to Morgan College partly because of their art studies?
Yeah.
So did you take art courses, and are you still doing art today, and if so, what kind?
So I came in as an art major, and then I learned that was going to be a lot of like all the most credit hours possible, art major and a music minor. That was going to be the most credit hours possible every single semester. And there was a semester where I was so overwhelmed, and I kind of learned that it was important for me to be able to build these relationships that were so transformative. And I kind of took a step down from art, turning it into a minor because of that, so that I could have a few semesters where I could enjoy being in college, because I learned that was so transformative. But I did a lot of drawing, and then I learned more about painting in college. The Gordon's art program was phenomenal. There was one of my professors, like I learned more about my faith in those classes than I did elsewhere. He taught me that to draw was a form of love, because you really there's so many parallels there. It's even kind of taught me that he taught that liberal arts education was important for art, because what are you painting about? What are you creating about? You need to have a deep understanding of the world to reflect on paper. But I've learned that mirrors the same with my faith. I need something to attach these abstract ideas I have of God to, right? And so art was that for me. I see so many parallels between the ways that I learned to truly look at something instead of kind of projecting what I think I see on it. I learned so much about that, and I even use it a lot. I've used art in lessons a lot, But yeah, I haven't had a lot of time. Well, in the past, like, 5 years, I'd been working like 2 jobs. It was a little hard to find time, and I'm kind of out of practice. But every now and then I'll go back and I'll just draw for fun, and it's nice now almost to not have been an art major, to not have that pressure on me. I needed to learn that art was not to impress other people, you know. And so I do still draw here and there, but I try to be like, no, you know, I'm not here to impress people. I'm not here to make a career out of it. I just want to experience the world through art, you know. So, but no, I haven't made anything recently. Yeah. Except for those charcuterie boards Alan talked about.
They're really good. Any other questions? Okay, thank you all for coming. Thank you, Jean.
Thank you.
Please come back next week when our Speaking of Faith speaker will be Tony Breuer, relatively new Trinity member, neuroscientist, and also an artist. See you next week.